Welcome to Module 4 of Chapters 11, 12, and 13 on promotion, advertising, and sales. So now we know who our customers are and how they make their purchases. We've defined our products, explored our distribution channels. We know our pricing strategy. And so now we are ready to communicate to our target market. Here's our list of learning objectives, as always. So what we're talking about here, we want to get to an integrated marketing communications plan. And so part of this is thinking about what is our message. And so that message may be different for various segments or distribution channels. But before we even start how we're going to convey this message, I want you to really think about what is the message that you're trying to deliver. Now, we can deliver our message in a variety of ways. We can do it through advertising, personal selling, publicity, or sales. And so communication is at the heart of all of these. And so as you all know, certainly with websites and media, social media, there's a lot of new approaches here. So I'm looking forward to you all being very creative about this. First, we must look at the communication process. And so here we've got a sender, the message, the channel that it's delivered, and then the receiver. So this is a straightforward communication process you've probably learned in many of your courses. But in marketing, we're going to look at this in a little bit different way, though this is true of any time that you communicate. One of the important aspects is what we call encoding. And so what that means is the meaning that we put into words. And so think of that film, The Persuaders, that we looked at the very beginning of the course. And so think of the difference of calling something an estate tax versus a death tax. Is it global warming, climate change? All right. So words do matter. And so we see this really being used a lot in politics, as I've just pointed out. But it's very true in all the messaging that you're doing. So once we have a sense of what our message is and how we're going to deliver that message, then our customer is going to decode. And so remember, rule number 1, perception is reality. And so words matter in the mind of our customer. And that's what we need to understand. And we understand this better through our market research, through testing our communications. We've got to test our communications. But remember what we've talked about too, that there is a lot of what we call clutter or noise. There are so many different messages in so many different forums going on that it's hard to cut through the clutter and get our message delivered. And then as always, we want to have a mechanism to get some feedback. And so perhaps that's a complaint process, how people can contact us. And that's a challenge for us now because when you call someplace, nobody picks up the phone. There aren't people behind that. But it could be something as simple as we do online shopping, where a helper person comes online and let's chat. And so that's kind of a new way that we solve some of those problems. So the web has made a big difference too. The web's changed. Web 1.0 is just delivering messages. Web 2.0 is communication is now a constellation. And so you can think of something, Twitter or other kinds of social media where many things are being communicated now, and there are a lot of people involved in those communications. So that can be an effective method, but it can be a method that's hard to control. Number 1, what is the message? And so So the message can be delivered in a logical way, stating both the pros and cons of being delivered. That works a little bit better with educated consumers. It can be a comparative message, how your product is relative to the competition. But in the persuaders, we saw that in messages that emotional appeal has strong cachet with humans. And so particularly in healthcare. And earlier in the class, I had talked about trust being one of the major products that we have to sell. Some people think hope is the product that we're selling. And so with those are very emotional things. So in crafting your message, does it have an emotional appeal, and does it instill trust and hope? So our question is going to be, what channels do we use to communicate? We can use mass communication versus a personal one-on-one approach. In healthcare, there is a lot of word of mouth. So once again, our patient experiences, their family's experience are really important, because they're going to go out and talk about your facility a lot more if something bad happened than if something good happened. But another important segment to not forget is our own employees. So think of an average hospital hiring, I don't know, 1,000, 2,000 people. Those people are out there delivering messages about your facility every day. What are they saying? Are they saying good things? Are they talking about the things that got screwed up today? And so we need to include our employees, and that's why we have to do internal marketing to our employees as well. Because in a sense, think of opinion leaders in terms of delivering a message, how much credibility they have. Now we can use other kinds of testimonials, opinion leaders. We talked about Jimmy Carter talking about the wonderful brain surgery he had at Duke. So that is an example of using an opinion leader, but don't overlook your employees in that. So advertising is paid and it's non-personal, but this is the word here, we can control this. So we're buying advertising space in some vehicle, and we control what is said in that. So it's something that's maybe most effective when awareness is minimal, get things going, a new product. But the key word there is we can control this. Versus personal selling. So the strength of that is it allows for direct feedback. And so we're going to talk about both of these in a few minutes here. So personal selling has a lot of strengths as well, and a lot of direct control, because you're making an appointment of some sort in delivering this message. It's more targeted, but it is very costly, and you've got to have people who are really good at this. So here's kind of just a nice little diagram that shows the difference of using advertising versus sales. Advertising in the pre-purchase period. You can also use it for post-purchase. Personal sales, probably the actual purchase period. There's a great impact there. Now, another form that we use is public relations, and this is also commonly used in healthcare organizations. It is indirectly paid in the sense, but that you're deliberately, maybe you're doing a public service announcement, something like that. But it has a high degree of credibility. So a public service announcement in the paper or the radio seems like it's not an ad. And so it has this higher credibility. However, there is no control over it. So one of the things that I've seen hospitals be very successful at is something, particularly tertiary medical centers, they have some new research or something that's newsworthy. And so they will contact the media and have them come and interview them on this great achievement. Could be the hospital, could be the physician. And so then it's run as a newspaper article. And so once again, you could see that has a lot more credibility. You've probably noticed in news feeds and Yahoo, places like that, where they'll be doing the news and then they will assert it's really an advertisement, but it looks like a news article. So that is a perfect example of what we're talking about here. However, they do have to label it as such. So there are sales promotion strategies as well. So these would be examples that we're familiar with: coupons, sweepstakes, premiums, trade promotions, samples, giving away free samples. We don't use this too often in healthcare. I've been tempted to do so. Wouldn't you love to do a BOGO on mammographies? And so actually that has been done in some ways. There have been successful campaigns of, give your mom a mammogram for Mother's Day, and you come in too. So we have a mother-daughter special here. So it is used a little bit. But the sales promotions can encourage usage or trial, buy more than one, identify new customers, build loyalty, etc. And so trying to get you to switch. This is so this can be used very successfully as well. Now here, these are probably two new terms you're not familiar with: push strategy versus pull strategy. So the push strategy is working through the established channels. Think historically of pharmaceutical sales. There were detailed sales reps that visited physicians' offices, hospitals, and so the idea was let's get physicians to use our product with their patients. And so that would be an example there. Pull strategy is trying to more direct to consumer. And so a good example of that is think of how pharmaceutical sales have changed. So now we have direct to consumer advertising. You see a lot of television advertising. Use our new wonderful drug for XYZ. Go and tell your physician about it and tell your physician that you want it. So we're going to switch a little bit to focusing on advertising in particular. So as always, here are our learning objectives there and what we're going to be looking at. So what is advertising? So some of the key words here is paid. So advertising is a paid form of non-personal presentations of goods, services, ideas, etc. And so we're kind of more familiar with product advertising in a way, but we can use it for to familiarize people with products or services. And so one effective way we see in healthcare is help seeking and providing information. So you've seen this. What? Do you have these 10 symptoms? And if you do, you might have diabetes, or you might have cancer, or you might have X, Y, and Z. And so go see your doctor, seek us out, buy our medication. And so that's kind of an effective way. And we see this a lot. If you are a social media person, and I know on my Facebook, I am just getting these quizzes all the time. And it is very hard to not take those. But I'm sure that behind there is some person who is getting information about me that's then trying to sell me something. So in developing an ad campaign, there are 6 basic steps we use. So first, who are we trying to target? What are our objectives? What's our budget? What is the message? How are we going to communicate it? And then we're going to evaluate. So what happened? Did it work? So let's look at those steps a little bit more detail here. So step one, define the target audience. So you've already done that in your marketing research. So you know who your audience is, you know who your segments are. And so that's who you're trying to reach. Hopefully you understand something about their demographics or their psychographics. And so you can tailor those messages based on what their needs and wants are. So in advertising, we have this series that we go through called the hierarchy of effects, creating awareness, creating interest. Well, now I'm going to evaluate it. I think I might try it, and now I'm going to use it. And so that's kind of a standard way that we look at this. Some marketing people, it's not included here, but what the next one that you really want to get to here is endorsement. To the extent that you can have someone love your service or product so much that they are out telling other people about it. And you can see where that can really happen in healthcare. You know, people have a good experience, things worked out well, they have a physician that they trust, they have confidence in them, they like how they're treated, they like how the staff's treated, particularly with something like pediatrics or obstetrics. You know, all that is really important because that's how people shop for healthcare. If you're going to have a baby, you're going to ask your 10 friends that had a baby, where did you go, and how did you like it? So with advertising, though, we've got to have an advertising budget. So we're going to look at this depending on the profitability of our service and what we're trying to accomplish. And so how much money do we really have to spend? Because what you want is promotion has a return on investment. We're promoting because we want to sell more of our product, and so we can maximize our profitability with that. So with that, so let me give you an example. When I took over as the VP of marketing at the hospital where I worked, they'd had someone that was doing advertising for them, and they had just launched a new campaign regarding obstetrics. And it was beautiful. I've got to say this. This advertising person, her taste was impeccable, the best that I've ever worked with. But here was the problem. It was really expensive. They spent so much money on this. So being the quant jock that I am, at the end of the year, it's like, yes, that was very nice. But I counted how many obstetrics patients did we get during this period versus how much did we spend on this campaign. And what I found was that we actually, if you took the total we spent and divided it by the number of patients, we spent more per patient than the revenue that we even got. Okay, so though it was a lovely thing, that's not what we're trying to accomplish. Now, you could say that this lovely campaign did some strong branding things on some key decision makers. Okay, I can accept that argument. But we don't just spend willy-nilly, okay? We're spending for a purpose, and we measure the return on investment of that. So in developing our message, once again, we can be rational, we can try an emotional message, maybe the moral high ground. If you think of politics, you see all of this. There's real different messages by different politicians, and this one has been very effective lately. So how do we know whether what it is, our message and the means we're delivering it could be effective? We are going to pre-test it. And so there are different ways that we can pre-test our material. And so here are some examples. So in placement of our communications program, we choose our medium. There can be a variety of ones. So is this going to be print medium, broadcast through television? Is it going to be direct mail? How about billboards? Billboards can be very effective too, and you see them used very frequently in healthcare. And direct mail, I've seen some of this. One of the ways that we've used direct mail that may be effective is you can buy lists of people that are newcomers to a community. And so if you want to introduce your physicians or the hospital, you can send them a welcome package there in the mail. So that can work kind of well for that. So what we are evaluating is the reach, the frequency, and then a common saying is, I know I'm wasting half of my marketing dollars. I just don't know which half. So there's a lot of science behind this. It's going to be hard for us as healthcare managers, not advertising specialists, to understand all of this. And so we're going to hire experts that help us with this too. So as I said, we're going to be looking at the particular vehicles that we use. And so here's a list again of all these different mediums that we can use. So the digital is the new. I'm going to assume that you guys are more sophisticated than I at these things, and but you can use all of those. All right, now an important message here is that when we are promoting, so there's different steps involved with this. And so a caution that I want to give you with there is we did some marketing, I think it was on mammograms. And so we did some interesting things and we generated a lot of inquiry. So with that though, you've got to have the staff available, the phone lines available, because what you don't want is when you attract that person and they call you or they contact you, that you can handle that call. You will lose them so quickly if you don't have a way to actually attend to their inquiry. So there's a whole process though too. So as we say, you've got to attract them, convert them, close, and we'll talk about close in a minute. And then we want them to delight them. We want them to have a wonderful experience so they go out and promote us to other people. And so as always, I'm saying that we definitely want to post-test this too. So did it work? Did they like it? So we're pre-testing the marketing, we're post-testing the marketing. And so as we've mentioned, there's a lot more, a lot newer ways that we can reach people as well. Blogging, so you talked about, is this real people? Are these fake people? A lot is done on social media of fake placement to promote, let's see, probably the Kardashians are the experts at this. So Facebook also, podcasts, Twitter, etc. So we're going to switch now to our last section here on sales. And so here are our learning objectives about sales. So we'll call it personal selling. And so this is a human-driven interaction. Maybe we'll have artificial intelligence. We'll have the robots. We'll send them out to do our sales. They might do a good job with it. And so this is between and within individuals, organizations, direct, face-to-face, and it's between the buyer and the seller. So I say buyer, so that's one of the things you have to know first. Is the person you're doing direct sales to able to make the decision? Are they the decision maker? And that's probably more important with corporate sales. So we can do it phone, video conferencing, computer networks as well. big on relationships. This is a real challenge. I probably fall into the camp that salespeople are born, not made, but there are some specific sales skills that you can use. But rule number one is people have to like you and they have to like to be around you. Now I'm going to talk about sales a little bit about selling yourself as well, because as you go on through your next set of interviews, you're going to be doing a sales job as well. So here are the steps that we use in this process. We got to have prospects. We don't just cold call. So who are our prospects? What are our leads? And so we may have some pre-approach to our leads. We may send them some information, something like that. And then at some point, we're going to be sitting eyeball to eyeball, and we're going to make a presentation. And so depending on what you're selling, you may use presentation aids, not just you talking. And this is a strong skill, closing. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But don't lose servicing as well, because you want to resell. So you forming this relationship so you can sell products and services over and over. Now, one of the things that is key in the sales process is objections. So our customer is going to list a bunch of objections to what it is we're selling. All right, so this is this dance that's going on here. And the objections may be based on a variety of factors. They may be logical, they may be psychological. Now, if you're really interested in sales, then you want to go through sales training. And so they'll teach you some really interesting techniques with some of this. But what your job then is to overcome the objectives and objections. And so without making them mad. All right, so part of this is advantages and disadvantages. You don't want to make them mad, so you agree with them in a way, but then you give them some more information that overcomes those so that you can positively convert them. And then the big challenge is closing. So how do we close? You know, you're in a job interview, and so you're going through this process too. And so you're trying to close, make me the offer. And part of what you can do there is, this is kind of interesting technique here. So think of a car salesman, some of the best, okay, they're good. But what they'll do is, you know, they'll see you evaluating things in your mind, and they want to get you to that mind being in the purchase stage. And so they might say, well, which of these cars would you prefer? Did you like the red or did you like the blue? And so then you're like, well, which one did I want? And so then you're already in the selection stage. And so think of, you know, what can you do in a job interview that's something like that? So maybe you could ask them a question. Well, if you were to offer me this position, when would you want me to start? So you're getting yourself placed in this person's mind in that office on a certain day, just something like that. So we all sell every day. But then, as we said too, following up with service too, because, and I'll tell you something about healthcare. Healthcare is a small world, and so you need to form those positive relationships because you never know when you're going to need somebody a little bit later. All right, now, another term that we use here is consultative selling. And so this is a salesperson with a defined area of expertise, and they're in there to help you solve a problem. Now, another thing that I wanted to mention before we close out on advertising as well is, as I said, You have these staff, the people that work at your facility, that can be sales agents for you. But one of the things that you should be sure to do is to include them on any kind of promotion you do. So, for example, I know a hospital and they were running an advertising campaign and they didn't tell anybody at the hospital. And so somebody shared with me, they're sitting there with their family and friends, and this commercial comes on television for this hospital. And they were like, oh, that's kind of cool. What do you think about that? And so the person that worked there was like, you know what? I had no idea that we were even going to do that. I've never seen this. Nobody included me in that. And so you don't want to be in that position. You want all of your employees to be sales agents for you, to be marketers for you, and to be in a position where they're knowledgeable, where they can represent you in that capacity. So this last slide here for this module is about sales management. Now, some of you may decide to go into sales, but you may also decide to use sales for your facility. So as such, you may be the sales manager. And so you're going to be responsible for recruitment and selection, and also to come up with a compensation package. So let me give you a couple of examples. Back in my day, I wanted two different salespeople. One was going to go out to industry and sell mostly our occupational medicine services. And so I wanted someone who was comfortable and good with outside sales. So, for example, people were like, well, where are we going to put her? Where's her office going to be? And I'm like, her office can be a closet. I don't want her to be in the office. I don't ever want to see her. I want her out sailing. And so she can come in here and do her reports or whatever, but she's not someone that's going to be hanging around here. And eventually I did get one. It was hanging around way too much and was not good. Okay. So you have to know what kind of people you're selecting. Now, as I'd mentioned before, the other sales function we had was the physician liaison. She was someone who had been a head nurse. She had also been in education, knew all the front office staff and the nursing staff of all the physicians' offices. And so she just had that personality. She could talk to anybody. She did not have that fear of rejection. See, that's the thing a salesperson has got to have, that it's 4:30 in the afternoon. They'll make that next call. They'll make that last call. They won't give up. They won't be overcome by rejection. So that's a whole personality that goes on there. But there are actually tests that you can give, and I use those some. I was getting pressured to hire someone that was a friend of the CEO who lost his job, and I'm like, oh, he could do the sales, and it's like, no, he can't. He's just not a salesperson. And for one thing, he talked way too much. And so when you're in sales, you want to be able to talk to anybody, but nobody on a sales call wants somebody that's just going to go and sit there and talk about themselves for an hour. Okay, no one has that time. So there are actually tests that you can give that can predict whether someone has good sales abilities. The other thing is compensation. And so I always set it up where they had some flat salary, but they were going to make more money for every sale they delivered. Now, I had some excellent salespeople, and some of the problem there I had, though, is they were driving so much business to the clinic that the operations staff really disliked them a lot because they were just really, really busy, okay? And so they should have just added some more staffing, but that wasn't my call. And so they would come to me and they'd say, will you please have her stop. We have way too much business. See, that's not what we're in in healthcare. Too often our operations people just don't have that mentality but we don't want them to be overwhelmed. But the point I'm making is I had to change this compensation structure because it was not fair, because what the staff started doing was sabotaging. When the clients would come in, they were really dragging their feet, and they were making them wait so long that it was affecting sales. And so that brings up another point. Do you have a marketing organization? Because if you don't have the person who ran this clinic just did not have that orientation, didn't understand all those dynamics that were going on. But I did have to change and make it more of a straight salary, because the salesperson was being affected so much by the operations people sabotaging their work. All right, so that's our last slide in this module. So hopefully you have a better idea of what you want to do in setting up your own marketing communications strategy in your paper.